I want you to start this deep dive by closing your eyes. We're going to run a little simulation.
Okay.
Imagine it is 2:00 a.m. The house is completely silent. The streetlights outside are just humming, but, the world is asleep. You, however, are wide awake. You are lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, but you aren't really seeing the plaster or the paint. You're watching a movie reel playing on the back of your eyelids. It's a replay of a conversation you had 6 hours ago.
The dreaded post-game analysis.
Exactly. You're rewatching every single frame, every stutter, every pause that lasted like half a second too long, every moment where you think you laughed a little too loud.
And your heart starts going.
It starts hammering against your ribs, a frantic rhythm in the quiet dark. You feel hot, then cold. You feel exposed, even though you are completely alone in your bedroom.
It's such a visceral place to be. It's that sensation of being under a microscope, magnified and judged, even when no one is actually watching.
Now, let's fast forward to the next morning. The sun is up. You're walking into a high school hallway, or maybe it's an office lobby. The setting doesn't really matter as much as the feeling.
Right.
To anyone else, it's just a hallway. Lockers, noise, people moving around. But to you, it is a minefield. You feel like an invisible outsider, yet at the same time, you feel like a giant neon sign is pointing right at you, highlighting every flaw. This is the world of Sam.
And Sam isn't, some tragic, incapable figure. Sam is bright. She's a talented artist who loves to draw. She has things to say. But she carries this secret weight.
A heavy one.
Yeah. She yearns for connection. She sees a group laughing over there and desperately wants to be part of it. But there is a wall. An invisible, towering wall built of fear.
And that is the central conflict we're unpacking today. It's the collision between two, I think, fundamental human truths. The biological need for connection and the paralyzing, overwhelming fear of it. Today, we are stepping right into the landscape of social anxiety. And we aren't just going to define it, we are going to try to dismantle it. We're going to look at the biology of why the brain hijacks the threat system, why we do things that actually make the anxiety worse, and ultimately how to build a ladder to climb over that wall.
It's a fascinating subject because it sits right at the intersection of our primal survival instincts and our modern social lives. And I think to really understand Sam and the millions of people like her, we have to start by clearing up a massive misconception.
Yeah.
We need to draw a hard line between shyness and social anxiety.
Right, because those terms get used interchangeably all the time. But clinically, they are. They're completely different experiences. I think everyone has felt shy. You walk into a party where you don't know anyone, you feel that hesitation. Maybe you check your phone a bit too much.
Sure. But that's not necessarily a disorder. No, it's not. That's the threshold we need to establish.
Yeah.
Shyness is a personality trait. It's a preference. It's that, initial awkwardness before you warm up, or simply a dislike of being the center of attention.
Right.
But the key distinction, and this is what all the literature emphasizes, is distress and impairment. Shyness is uncomfortable, like a pebble in your shoe. You can still walk. You can still dance.
Whereas social anxiety is more like a broken leg in terms of function.
That's a good analogy, yeah. Social anxiety is the disorder because it disrupts your ability to live your life. It is a pervasive, intense fear of being humiliated, rejected, or embarrassed. And the crucial difference is avoidance.
Ah, okay.
A shy person might go to the party and just, stay by the snack table. A person with social anxiety might not go at all. Or if they do, the internal distress is so high that their body is literally screaming at them that they are in physical danger.
And when you say physical danger, you mean that quite literally in terms of the body's response, right? Because reading about the symptoms, it's not just all in your head.
Oh, absolutely not. The amygdala, the part of the brain that processes fear, it doesn't know the difference between a tiger in the bushes and a room full of strangers who might judge your outfit. The physiological response is identical. It's the fight-or-flight mechanism. Trembling, rigid posture, sweating, heart palpitations, all of it.
And that must create a really nasty feedback loop. I mean, if I'm just shy, my hands might shake a little and I can just ignore it. But if I have social anxiety, I notice the shaking and my first thought is, oh no, everyone sees I'm shaking.
Exactly. You become anxious about being anxious. The blushing, the sweating, these aren't just bodily functions anymore. They're perceived as like proof of your incompetence.
Wow.
You feel like you're broadcasting your fear to the world, which makes you more afraid, which makes you shake more. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of panic.
So, okay, let's talk about how people handle this, because the research highlights something called the anatomy of avoidance. And what struck me is that for someone like Sam, The battle often starts way before she even steps into that hallway.
That's anticipatory anxiety. And honestly, it is exhausting just to read about, let alone live with. Imagine worrying about a presentation, a dinner date, or even just returning a shirt to a store, weeks or even months in advance.
The mind becomes a simulation engine for failure.
Totally. It runs every possible scenario where things go wrong. What if I trip? What if I forget my words? What if I have nothing to say and there's that awful, awkward silence?
By the time the event actually arrives, the person is already worn out. They've lived through the failure 1,000 times in their head before they've even put their shoes on.
And this leads to the most common coping mechanism, the sanctuary.
Which sounds nice, but it's actually a trap, isn't it? This is the decision to just avoid the public setting entirely. No dining out, no dating.
Right. And the research shows how this can spiral into agoraphobia, the fear of leaving your safe environment at all. But here's the thing that really caught my attention. Even if people do go out, they often engage in what psychologists call safety behaviors.
What are those exactly?
They're the things we do to manage the anxiety in the moment.
Like finding a quiet bathroom and locking yourself in for 10 minutes just to breathe.
That's a classic one. Or sticking to the one person you know, like glue. Or the most modern version of this, the digital shield.
Staring at your phone. You're just scrolling through emails you've already read just to look busy.
Right. You are physically present, but you are signaling to the world, and more importantly to yourself, that you are not really there. It feels like safety.
But it's not.
No. And here is the mechanism that makes this so dangerous. It prevents you from disconfirming your fears.
Okay, let's unpack that mechanism because that feels like a key insight. You're saying that using the phone to feel safe actually keeps the anxiety alive.
Yes, exactly. Let's say you go to a party, you feel terrified, so you stare at your phone the whole time. You survive. You get home. Your brain doesn't say, hey, we handled that social situation. It says, wow, that was a close call. Thank goodness we had the phone. We survived because we had the shield.
You never give your brain the chance to learn that you would have survived without it. You attribute your safety to the crutch, not to your own resilience.
Precisely. You are reinforcing the idea that the world is dangerous and that you are fragile. You never actually drop the armor to see if the war is even still happening.
And while you're standing there with your armor up, holding that phone, there is this sensation that we call the spotlight effect. I think this is something almost everyone has felt at some point.
Oh, for sure.
It's that feeling that you are on a stage with a literal spotlight following your every move.
It's a profound error in perception. If you hold a cup with a slightly shaking hand, you assume everyone in the room noticed it and is thinking, look how nervous that person is.
Yeah.
But the reality check here is, well, it's both brutal and liberating.
Most people do not care.
They really don't. Most people are the stars of their own movies. They're worried about their own hair, their own conversations, their own insecurities. They aren't looking at you unless you are directly affecting them.
It's funny, isn't it? We spend so much energy worrying about what people think of us, when the reality is they're spending all their time worrying about what we think of them.
Exactly. Once you really internalize that you are just background noise to most people, it is incredibly freeing. You realize the audience you've been performing for doesn't even exist.
But let's say the event is over. You survived. You're back in your room. This brings us back to where we started, the echo chamber, the after. The research calls this rumination or post-event processing.
This is the 2.0 AM replay. It's obsessing over tiny details. Why did I say you too when the waiter said, enjoy your meal? I'm such an idiot.
I do that all the time. But for someone with social anxiety, it's not just a funny, embarrassing little story. It's evidence.
It's viewed through a distorted lens. You aren't remembering the conversation as it actually happened. You're remembering it through the presumed critical eyes of the other person. And often, this stems from past experiences.
Like bullying.
Yeah, if you have a history of bullying, teasing, or some profoundly negative social experience, that memory takes root.
Yeah.
You start to expect the worst consequences every time.
It creates another self-fulfilling prophecy. You fear rejection, so you act awkward or withdrawn. Maybe you don't make eye contact, which makes it hard for people to connect with you.
So they back off.
And you interpret that as, see? They don't like me.
No.
Which just confirms your original bias that you're socially inept. It's a vicious cycle that feeds itself.
It is.
I want to zoom out for a second before we get into the solutions. Because when you are in that headspace, staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., you feel like the only person on Earth who is broken, like a defective toy.
Utterly alone.
But the numbers paint a very, very different picture.
They certainly do. We're looking at approximately 15 million people in the United States alone who meet the criteria for social anxiety disorder. This is not a niche experience.
And looking globally, it manifests in different cultural ways. The research brought up the Japanese concept of a hikikomori.
Yes. This is a fascinating and tragic phenomenon. These are individuals, often young men, who isolate themselves from society for extended periods, sometimes for years. They withdraw into their rooms and just cut off all physical contact. It's the sanctuary taken to its most extreme.
But there's a paradox there, because even as they hide, they are suffering. We mentioned earlier that humans are social animals.
That is the cruel irony of social anxiety. You find comfort in solitude because it feels safe from judgment. But biologically, psychologically, we starve without connection. The isolation that protects you eventually begins to destroy you. We need to be seen, even if being seen terrifies us.
So how do we do it? How do we break the illusion and dismantle the wall? That the second half of our research is all about the toolkit, and I want to get really practical here. It seems like it has to start with a philosophical shift before we even get to the techniques.
It has to start with cognitive shifts. You have to challenge the narrative. We've already talked about the spotlight effect, realizing nobody is watching. But there's another shift that I think is even more important: assertiveness regarding rejection.
Unpack that for me, because assertiveness and rejection don't usually go together in my head.
It means accepting that you cannot please everyone. And more importantly, that is okay. Rejection does not inherently mean something is wrong with you. It just means there was a lack of connection.
So it's not a judgment on your character.
Not at all. Maybe they were tired. Maybe you have different interests. You have to move from they didn't like me, so I'm broken, to they didn't like me, and that's fine. We just didn't vibe.
It protects your self-worth.
Exactly. Your value isn't on a table every time you say hello. And you have to drop the idealized version of how a social event should go. We have this script in our heads that we have to be charming, witty, and perfectly poised.
And if we stutter once, we fail the whole thing.
Right. But human interaction is messy. It's awkward. One of the best tools mentioned is simply accepting the cringe.
The cringe. I love that.
If you trip over your words, or you wave at someone who wasn't actually waving at you, the instinct is shame. The tool is to laugh. If you can make a joke of it, wow, I completely forgot how to speak English for a second there.
Yeah.
You deflate the tension. You show confidence.
You show that you don't take yourself so seriously that a small mistake shatters you.
You got it.
But sometimes you can't just laugh it off. Sometimes the body has hijacked the brain. Your heart is racing. Your chest is tight. You can't just think your way out of a panic attack.
No, you can't. For that, we need a physical reset. The most effective tool mentioned over and over is diaphragmatic breathing. Deep belly breathing.
Why does that work so well? Is it just distraction?
It's actually biological hacking. When you're anxious, you take shallow breaths into your chest. This signals to your brain that you're in danger. It mimics running from a predator. By forcing slow, deep breaths into the stomach, you're physically sending a signal up the vagus nerve to the brain saying, we're safe. We can calm down.
It's like a manual override.
A manual override. And the research also mentioned art therapy in this context, specifically regarding the amygdala. That seemed really interesting, using a nonverbal medium to handle a verbal problem.
It makes perfect sense neurobiologically. Social anxiety is largely regulated in the amygdala, the emotion center. Sometimes words aren't enough. We get stuck in these language loops. Art painting, journaling, drawing. It allows for expression that bypasses that logical brain that's just spinning in circles. It lets you process the emotion without needing to articulate it perfectly.
Now, for many people, breathing and painting are great supplements, but they might not be enough to knock down the whole wall. This is where we get into the heavy-hitting therapy. The sources talk about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and specifically something called systematic guided exposure.
This is the gold standard, right?
It is.
And frankly, exposure sounds terrifying. It sounds like we're going to throw someone into a shark tank.
It sounds that way, but if it's done right, it's actually very gentle. It's about building a hierarchy, a fear ladder.
Okay, walk us through what a fear ladder looks like. Let's say I'm Sam.
Okay. You don't start by giving a speech to 1,000 people. You sit down and you list social situations from mildly annoying to full-blown panic. Maybe the bottom rung of the ladder is just making eye contact with the cashier when you buy gum.
Okay, that seems manageable.
So you go do it, you feel the anxiety rise, you sustain the eye contact,
Yeah.
and then you walk away. And you realize I survived. Nothing bad happened. Your brain registers a tiny win. It's data.
And then you move up a rung.
Right. Maybe the next rung is asking a stranger for the time. Then maybe it's asking a question in class. Then going to a small gathering. You slowly expose yourself to the fear, staying in the situation until the anxiety naturally comes down.
So you're essentially rewiring the brain through experience. You're building a database of evidence that contradicts the anxiety.
Exactly. You are proving to your amygdala, step by step, that the tiger isn't actually there.
Which brings us back to Sam. We left her in that hallway, feeling invisible, hiding behind her wall. But the narrative in our source material doesn't end there, and I really appreciated how it ended.
Me too. Because it wasn't some fairy tale. She didn't suddenly become the prom queen or the loudest person in the room.
No, the breakthrough came from something small, unexpected kindness. She was sketching in her notebook, probably using it as a shield, and a girl named Sarah noticed.
And Sarah asked a simple question. Do you like anime?
And that was the crack in the wall.
It was. Sam realized that her silence had been interpreted by others not as weirdness, but as disinterest. Her peers thought she didn't want to be friends with him. Once that misunderstanding was cleared up, the floodgates opened.
The text describes Sam's friend group becoming a melting pot of different personalities. And Sam didn't have to change who she was. She didn't have to become an extrovert.
She just had to be present. Genuine acceptance doesn't require you to be the center of attention. It just requires connection. Sam went from an invisible outsider to a valued member of a community.
There is a phrase the author uses to describe the outside world at the end of Sam's journey. It stops being a terror and becomes a conquered battlefield.
Conquered battlefield. I like that imagery. It validates the struggle. It implies that the fight was real. We shouldn't pretend it wasn't hard.
No, the struggle is valid, but the victory is possible.
And if you are listening to this, and you are currently in the before, you're in that anticipation phase, or you're in the sanctuary hiding away, what is the one thing we want you to take away?
I think it's this. Your anxiety is lying to you about your value. It is telling you that you are only worth what others think of you, and that others are always thinking the worst.
But the world is not a courtroom. It's a messy, chaotic, wonderful place, full of people who are just as insecure as you are.
And maybe, just maybe, someone is waiting for you to look up from your phone so they can ask you about what you're drawing.
The wall feels solid, but it's built of thoughts, and thoughts can be changed.
A huge thank you to everyone listening to this deep dive. We hope this helps you understand that invisible wall a little better, whether you're standing behind it or trying to help someone climb over it.
Take care of yourselves.
We'll see you next time.